Okay, now I know this video works, thankfully. A little bit smoother, a little bit better. Sorry about that there, folks. I really had high hopes for the garage room. I have to look into that. My phone works phenomenally well out in the garage usually. I've done Facebook Live out there numerous times and Zoom meets and all that, mostly on account of having kids in the house, which is why I was trying to do it out there as well. So yeah, this is really surprising that it doesn't work. I'll have to look into that because I do want to make that happen. I do want garage streams to be a thing because it'll be much, much easier to get ahead on a few projects out there if I can chit chat with you guys while it's happening. Because I got a ton. I was hoping to rebuild the forks on my that's a 1971 BMW R60/5 that I'm trying to get working on, but it's just with all these policy changes the Liberals keep passing, it is slow going, which brings us to today's topic, I suppose. The motions that the Liberals tabled in the House on Monday and then passed today, unfortunately. They did so by using a closure motion, which ends debate in the House and asks the House to basically vote and say, hey, we've debated this enough, let's have a vote. And then they vote on that. And then the House in this case did vote that they had enough debate and then voted to pass motion number 25, which was the motion that expands the scope legally of C-21 so that the Standing Committee on Public Safety can hear these huge amendments that expanded a bunch, but also limits debate on the bill dramatically, which long and short of it is, as I said earlier, which on my horribly choppy video, overall next 2 weeks is when you can expect that to probably start. C-21 will leave the House within 2 weeks, and it'll make its way into the Senate. Now, at least in the Senate, the time allotment rules are a little bit more strict. Graydon, no problem. Thanks for the computer. Yeah, I prefer my garage, but admittedly, it's that frame rate. I couldn't have watched that myself, and I certainly couldn't have asked anyone else to. But back to the point, yeah, within 2 weeks, it'll leave the House and go to the Senate, where there are some tools at the government's disposal, obviously, because they are the government, but they do not have the same control over time allotment. The one that is supposed to be the sober second house. So we'll see what happens there. But and this is a bit beyond my politics is really around guns, like gun-centric stuff and how guns interact with politics. I don't really follow, if you can make sense, the larger stuff. Well, thank you. But Graydon, we'll chat. You and I will chat in a little bit. I got a few bikes to rebuild. It sounds like the smarter people than me, the ones that follow politics in a really big way, the full-time news journalist type guys, are saying that this really does seem to indicate like an appetite for potentially a proroguement, which is the suspension of Parliament. And they're saying that they kind of think that this would be a proroguement that would be a precursor to an election, which is interesting. I haven't read up on it too much. I've been quite busy trying to get a magazine out the door and working at the other company. So it's been pretty busy as of late, but I'm going to be reading up on that a lot. Otherwise, I'm not really sure. That the only interesting thing is to see the NDP doubling down even more so on their stance that this is hunky-dory, I suppose. I will admit some personal disappointment with Alistair McGregor. This feels incredibly unprofessional to even say, because I like to report these things somewhat dispassionately. With these live streams, it's hard to keep your personality out, and I guess I should just admit I'm pretty disappointed that Alistair McGregor, who sat through SECU, the G4, G46 amendments, watched the Liberals try and ban guns that the Liberals themselves didn't think would be banned by those amendments, referencing the Ruger #1, referencing the Browning BAR, referencing tons of other guns. Today, literally tweeting like, what guns can't you buy? After 3 years of like, I thought like it was very disappointing, because this is a man who sits literally at the seat of power at the table where these exact things are decided, going, oh, what do you mean you can't buy some guns? After 3 years of, 1,500 rifles banned in 2020, handguns banned in 2022. Like, what guns can't we buy? Do you want the list? Like, ask Justin for it. Maybe he'll send it to you. That was really disappointing. And I think kind of showcases the level where pragmatic management of issues like these, like regulation of guns, drugs, everything else, housing, you name it, has fallen so far on the list of priorities below political expediency. I think that's incredibly concerning because, I mean, this is a guy that went to an IPSC match. He seemed to talk quite wholeheartedly about the issues facing his constituents that he met at the Victoria Fishing Game Protection Association. They have a weird club name out there. I think that's the name of it. Victoria Fish, and it wouldn't be Protective Fishing Game because that would be a different kind of club, but it would be anyways. He went out to watch an IPSC match. He talked to a bunch of gun owners. He came back to the committee and he gave a very impassioned speech that moved me. So I feel pretty, put the knife in here kind of thing there. But I guess we'll see how this shakes out. So that's where we're at now. There's not much more to add to that. I'm going to keep following it. I was out of the office today, unfortunately, so I couldn't follow it. But super disappointing. So I'm going to start going through the comments now. Graydon says, I'm a motorcycle technician in BC and own my own shop. I'll rebuild and tune your forks, no charge. Funny you mentioned Graydon. These forks are not being tuned because these are old school BMW Airhead forks. And they're going on a bike that I actually intend to sell. I bought a 1971 and a 1973 BMW R60 and R75 last year for $6,000 for the pair. They've been sitting on a guy's shelf, believe it or not, in his garage because the man had a shelf of motorcycles in his garage. And I figured I'd just fix one up and sell it. That would cover off keeping the 750. So that's my plan. So I'm fixing up this red 600. It's going extremely well. It's an incredibly awesome bike to work on as far as all the motorcycles I worked on, like compared to like my RC51 or like CBR 600 valves and stuff like that. This thing is like adjusting valves on an Airhead takes like 2 minutes. So I appreciate the offer, but I do quite enjoy it. I would enjoy hearing what shop. You can just message me if you want. I swing by. Motorcycles are actually kind of my biggest passion in life, motorcycles and old cars. That's not really a secret. So I like to support the shops that support us. So I'd swing by. I'm always riding around BC. I think the Senate passes literally anything and everything they do. The Senate does not stop anything. So fun story. When I testified in front of the Senate on C-21, gosh, was that 3 years ago? I got a random email just being like, hey, do you want to come testify on this gun bill? We think maybe you know something about guns. And I was like, boy, howdy, would I like to go testify. So yeah, they put me on a plane. It cost a freaking fortune too, because everything is booked kind of last minute because like government moves incredibly slowly, but also does things at the last minute. So it wasn't the cheapest airfare and whatnot that they paid for. So I went down there, and the thing that they tell you when you go to testify in front of the Senate, and this was the Standing Committee on Public Safety, like the Senate version of SECU. They say, don't go into the room and just say, this bill sucks, you should vote it down. They literally just tell you that as a witness. Like it's instruction that is given to you, because they say that is not the role of the Senate. The role of the Senate is not to append Parliament, is to refine Parliament, which it's hard to argue with that. I mean, it is, they're not elected. I think if a conservative government was to say, hey, you know what, these laws were like if Pierre wins, which we all hope he does, and he turns around and goes like, no, we're going to just go back to the way the gun laws were under Harper. It wasn't partisan. No one hated it. We're just going right back to that. We're just going to reset to 05 or whatever, right? Like without a gun registry, because no one's bringing that back. If he was to do that, I just don't know. Like, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens. Anyways, who's this dude? Not bad for a 29-year-old making 180 plus another 10 grand in committee. Who's 29? I'm curious about that. But yeah, so anyways, you go to the Senate and basically you can't You literally can't say anything. Oh, Ganir, yeah, he did not have good contributions to that Senate committee. That committee meeting. We'll get into that. So yeah, long story short, the Senate will not stop C-21. I shouldn't say that. They may be able to. This is where I'm sitting here in Kelowna, BC, many thousands of kilometers away. Senate people are really tied into time allotment and parliamentary procedure stuff, which for people that work in Ottawa, that's kind of like I'm trying to think of an analogy, but like parliamentary procedure and time allotment are to political employees as like the Snap-on truck is to mechanics. Is a really shitty but closest analogy I can come up with. In that it's what they run on. Like it's what government actually uses. I mean, I've heard from numerous politicians that time allotment, which is the government's ability to decide how long committees, parliamentary houses, etc., can debate certain things, is the largest tool of government. Because when you can control time, that's when you can actually actually control stuff, right? Because people are an unknown, they'll do whatever, but time is a pretty fixed thing. If you can control how long people have to do things, you can kind of make outcomes happen. So time allotment and parliamentary procedure are things that Senate is really tied into because, of course, they're working in Ottawa. They are technically politicians. They obviously work quite closely with parliamentarians in certain cases, so they talk, and they definitely may be able to do things that way. We're already seeing the Bloc kind of do some of this with what Michaud was saying in the House with regards to the Liberals screwing around with their time management skills on C-21 throughout its whole year-long arc so far. They're just kind of messing around with parliamentary stuff. Not the meat, like, and when I say that, what I mean is messing with parliamentary stuff in this particular case is like, they're not, as we all know, the Bloc Québécois wholeheartedly supports the actual purpose of Bill C-21 to ban guns. In fact, Michaud specifically went to media and said that her only request is that Marco Mendicino create CFAC faster because she needs CFAC to OIC ban guns faster. So they're wholeheartedly and completely behind what C-21 aims to do, but they are throwing parliamentary hurdles in their way by saying things like, well, you're wasting time. And that's sort of a signal that they're going to continue to maybe drag parliamentary feet. And the reasoning why they would do that, and I know there's a bunch of comments I missed. This is actually kind of important. I realize no one's really spoken to it. The reason this is important is because the Bloc and the NDP may both end up kind of doing stuff like this in the next bit, because they both, how to explain this? Man, this is tricky. They both want to gain political favor. They want to get ahead of the Liberals politically and potentially put the Liberals on their back foot without sacrificing their own stance on guns. So what the Bloc can do is Christina Michaud can stand up in the House and completely, with no logical conflict whatsoever, say, the Liberals have wasted all of our time by introducing this bill a year ago and then introducing all the amendments at the last minute and all this other stuff and forcing us to respond. And then also go to Quebec media and say, we need Marco Mendicino to stand up that CFAC committee faster because we need to get these guns banned by decree faster. She can say both of those things, and they're not mutually exclusive. She can hold both of those opinions very clearly in her head, and the public has no issue with that. So that's where you're going to see the NDP and the Bloc. If they're going to start walking this stuff back, the first step is going to be them doing parliamentary and time allotment stuff and starting to throw those hurdles in the way, because it doesn't hurt the public opinion. It just slows down the parliamentary procedure without risking the public opinion. So that's sort of where we're at with that. And I think there's a huge opening there for the Senate, I think. So now I'll get back to all of these things. Your MP, all they care about is their money. Yeah, they do. And I think, don't we all? That's the one thing I'd say is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, everyone just wants their job, and I hold MPs to a higher standard for sure, but it's one of those things where you have to kind of wish in one hand and, in the other. Yeah, Liberal MP Quinder Escanier. Yeah, he was in there. Boot Hill Performance. I've actually swung by her shop. I haven't been in the shop before, but I've ridden by it a few times. I got a buddy on Vancouver Island, lives on Souk, has a 1971 Norton 750 Commando. And as soon as I finish my R75, we're supposed to go ride, I think, down to Montana. If we can do that this fall, that would be great. But given I've got 2 companies to run, 2 kids, and he's got a successful photography business in the Souk area, it's not looking good so far. If the government were to change and I could go back to just working normally, like a normal human, that would be awesome. And then maybe I could get it. Do I know Marcel Ernie? He's big into bikes. I do know Marcel Ernie. I'm into all motorcycles, but in my younger years, I did more track riding, down at the Ridge Raceway and Mission and stuff like that. And Marcel is always around, and he also lives in Kelowna around here, and there's a big track around here. So I've bumped into him a couple of times. He's also, as everyone knows, quite politically outspoken. So he's an interesting individual for sure. A very, very fast rider. That is one guy, man. Like he's a guy I've ridden motorcycles. I'm not a fast rider. And I've ridden people that are fast. He's kind of he's the guy the fast guys that I ride with are like, he's a fast guy. So I rode with him. I just thought he was an alien. I had a meeting with him, and surprised wait, did you get a meeting with Ganier? How did that go? I'd be very curious to hear what he had to say. That's what all gun owners have to do, by the way, is sit down with your MP. Ideally, emails are great, phone calls are great, but this all leads to sitting down across the table and saying, hey, what's up? Can you explain how these new amendments make it harder for a future government to reverse? I heard Marco say something about it. Yeah, so basically OICs can be like legislation, like they're instituting now with this definition. There's no real way. I mean, you could, I guess, technically. This is getting above my pay grade, and this is where I'll say it too. We're getting into parliamentary procedure and like constitutional law type stuff of like what the government can and can't do, where like no one knows, to be very clear. Like, I know a lot about gun law. I don't know as much as obviously Ian Runkle lawyers do, but I know a lot about gun law and politics and the interface there. And I know a lot about how Parliament works and how these legislation stuff works. But because we're kind of through the veil here with these liberal amendments, they're not following standard procedure like at all. It's really hard to say what happens. But to get back to the main point of why it's hard to reverse, the legislation that includes that definition of guns that are manufactured to have a magazine originally designed with over 6 rounds, that will require legislation to undo. So if there are guns that are captured by that legislation, that particular definition, specifically guns made after C-21 passes with a magazine that holds over 6 rounds, the Conservatives will have to legislate. They'll have to file, do the same thing, the same thing as C-21, a bill to amend Firearms Act and certain regulations, et cetera, to remove that definition to get those guns out, because you can't really OIC guns against legislation. They couldn't turn around and say, hey, 2025 gun company with a 7-round magazine, we're going to OIC your gun into legality. Wouldn't really be straight up, just wouldn't be right when the legislation says that gun is prohibited. So when Marco says it would be harder to undo, he means because it would have to go through legislation, which means if there was potentially like a conservative minority, which is what the current polling models predict, it will be harder for them to walk this stuff back. Basically, think Harper and the long gun registry. He couldn't get that back until there was a majority, because he couldn't OIC the long gun registry out of existence. So that's why how do you think they can do this? They haven't even started the 20. They can't. They can't do this in terms of completion, in terms of actually getting this done, getting like physically going. Someone actually, me, who owns AR-15s, not owning AR-15s seems quite unlikely. I don't know what else to say. Not as I'm, cold dead hands guy. Like, I got 2 kids. One of them sleeping right above me. I'm not risking anything like that. But like, I also just don't expect the government to follow through on this. Like, it took them 3 years to legalize pot. Everyone wanted that one. It was the easiest win ever. And they still, I don't know if anyone's a Simpsons fan, but that scene, and I'm not, this is the funny part. I just like GIFs because I'm emotionally stunted and use them to express myself on Twitter. But the freaking meme of the guy in The Simpsons stepping on a rake is the Trudeau government. Everything they do, they just every time, like, oh, this drug everyone seems to like, and we're going to legalize it. It'll take 3 years and knock all the profit out of that entire industry. I can't see how a government that struggles to do things everyone wants them to do can do something that a ton of people don't want them to do. And also, too, is quite honestly the hardest thing for a government to do, because like fixing healthcare is right up there with take guns away from hundreds of thousands of people that don't want to give them up. Like, those are very difficult things for a government to tackle. So no, I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll see what happens. Alistair wouldn't be disappointing me. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. He impressed us so much more with that speech, man. Like, I said it and I still maintain it, which kills me, is that speech he gave in Secu. I, in 10 years of working this industry and being involved in gun politics for 16, I've never felt a politician echo my sentiments. There's been a few witnesses that provided testimony in the very early days of the Long Gun Registry's removal, specifically during the first attempt in a minority government. There was a lot of emotional and impassioned speeches then that were phenomenal. But in recent memory, Alistair's was the best one, and I was so disappointed in that. But I mean, hey, you know what? He's, like I said before, everyone is entitled to their opinion, including MPs. The difference with MPs is that their job is kind of tied to it. If they hold an opinion that too many of their constituents hold opposing opinions to, they lose their job. That's a bummer for them, I guess. But Alistair McGregor's also in Cowichan, which is a very strong NDP riding. It's vacillated and is pulled up and down. They could certainly put a good candidate in that riding and win it for sure. And I don't think that his discussions around the gun club is going to help, because I also think, and I think I've spoken to this before, is that they don't seem to think about the depth of anger they're igniting here, in that it's one thing to think that the Victoria Fish and Game Protective Association has 3,000 members, say. As a politician, you can look at that and go, okay, 3,000 members, it's not enough to sway the election, because I think in Cowichan, Malahat, it's not. I think he won by a larger margin. So he looks at the gun club and goes, well, they're not enough for me to lose. So he feels safe. But then he forgets, okay, well, some of those people are married, and their wives are not going to be super happy that their husbands are losing thousands of dollars of product or property. So start thinking about, okay, if they've got wives, they've got kids, 3,000 people, well, maybe it's 5,000 votes influenced by this at the Fish and Game Association there locally. And then you start to think, okay, how angry are they? If I'm going to go and reach into their gun safe and take $10,000 out in terms of property, are they going to go volunteer? Have I just made 5,000 people potentially sign up to volunteer for my nearest competitor? And that's where it starts to change the math. And I don't think they've thought that through, because legit, in my life, I'm 38. I've never experienced this, period. I'm sure I know older gun owners are saying, well, I know they're looking at the screen going, I've totally lived through this. But for us young guys that weren't there, like, we couldn't have been there. I was born in 85, so no chance. It's a weird feeling, and I don't think the government can appreciate that for millennials. And this is where I'll go off on a bit of a tangent, I suppose, which is what these live streams are for. Millennials like myself, I'm technically an elder millennial. I'm incredibly lucky to own a home. Like, incredibly. Like, I feel like I won the freaking lottery to have simply been born at the right time and live in an area and have a job where I could move into an area that was cheap enough to buy a house, and it all worked out. But I'm very, 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 very lucky. And I am a tiny, tiny subset of my entire generation. For the rest of my generation who doesn't own a home and who never will, likely, who looks at their life and go, I will likely never own the home I live in, everything else is more important as a result, because that's what you got. Like, that's why you see so many young people are their identities are wrapped up in politics or clothing or fashion or dance or this or that, because that's what they've got. They don't have a home that they can build a family in and feel stable with. So it's everything else that their identity becomes. And for a lot of young people in Canada, that's firearms. There's a lot of young men out there that this is their hobby. We've seen a massive uptick in the last few years. I think it's related to the fact that a lot of young people don't feel stable and they don't feel secure. And by God, I will argue to the ends of the earth that there is nothing that provides more feelings of stability and security like a firearm. It's one of the most security providing devices in the world. It's why we wrap our presidents and prime ministers with tons of people with them. So it's totally logical. And to take that away from people, this is where I'll say again as a tangent, I'm a guy, I always think about these mass shootings. Everyone always says it's the guns, because it's always a gun involved. It's also a young man. It's always a freaking young guy. And I'm a young guy and I own guns. So I can't help but kind of be like, what's the issue there? And then to go to all these young men that are feeling it's such a hard time out there to be a young dude, like the economy, the jobs, everything else. It's not a good time, straight up. And to say, hey, we're going to take one of the big things for you, a key thing that it might, for a lot of anti-gun people, they don't get that it's just a hobby. You go to the gun range, you shoot your AR-15 at a paper target. What's the big deal? But for those of us that do it, where there's much more ethics or responsibility and symbolism, I guess, ultimately wrapped up in this, that's what they're taking away, and that's what they don't get. And to take that away from someone, they will absolutely volunteer to go door knock. Are you kidding me? Like, go knock on doors for 3 days during an election because we're going to go take 10 grand from you? Like, well, that math checks out, because last I checked, 3 grand a day. I don't make 3 grand a day. I'll go knock on doors. It's insanity. So I think I'm very disappointed, but I'm very curious to see what it'll be, how it shakes out. Side Bob, or that's right, it was Sideshow Bob rake in the face. That's who it was. You said you liked old bikes. I've got one for you. PM me. I appreciate your work. I am going to PM you because I am addicted to old motorcycles like they are crack cocaine, let me tell you. So is it true we keep what's already in circulation, banning only future guns? No, that is not true. I'm so sorry that I'm way behind on these comments. I'm gonna work through these quickly. So is it true we only keep what's already in circulation? No. The legislation will ban everything that is created after C-21, but the minister is also committed to reconstituting the Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee and then putting basically the question to the committee of what guns should we prohibit that already exist. So if you look at this legislation, C-21, the definition is everything forward. The Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee, which you will hear me refer to as CFAC, because I'm not going to say that a million times in this live stream. CFAC bans everything backwards. They will go, and we've heard this in the House already, Pam Damoff, when she introduced the motion to limit debate on this, the motion that passed, number 25. Elizabeth May specifically asked Pam Damoff if the SKS was going to be banned, because the SKS was used in a shooting in Saanich, a police ambush that was disguised as bank robbery in 2022. That's her riding, Elizabeth May's riding. So she asked, and Pam Damoff basically intimated that that is one of the guns that it would not be captured by the definition. She explicitly said the definition provided does not include the SKS. However, it's one of the guns that they would be asking CFAC to look at. And basically kind of, I don't know, I could paraphrase it because I'm not going to quote it. I can't mimic her facial expressions, nor would I try to. That she was basically intimating to Elizabeth May the SKS was going to be banned by CFAC. So you could expect that the way to look at C-21 is the previous amendments they introduced, G4 and G46, what everyone is pretty familiar with. G4 was their previous definition, 5 rounds as originally designed. G46 was the giant list of guns to ban. C-21, the definition is G4. So C-21 is G4, the legislation. CFAC is G46. They're just going to take that list of guns. They're going to give it to CFAC. They're going to pull the Browning BAR and Ruger #1 and Mauser sporting rifle out, and they're going to ban the rest of them. Everything else will just go. It'll be the exact same situation. I would bet a ton of money on that. Aren't you happy we dropped? If you want Supermoto, put it on some Eurotrash. Oh, I do like Supermotos. I'm sorry you don't like my Honda XR. I do like my XR 650 Supermoto. I will ride it a ton tomorrow, and I will probably have a problem with the clutch that makes the front wheel come up off the ground. It happens all the time on that bike. I should probably get it fixed. It's weird, and yet it just keeps happening. Moving through, then he said he would offer fair compensation. Yeah, the fair compensation thing is a total joke, and the buyback, he just died. No one's talking about that. So I don't know how the buyback is going. I'm very curious, and I am digging into that one because it's one that's a little bit easier to dig into with records keeping. One day I got to do a video on how to dig into this stuff because there's a ton of information on the government websites that no one's really accessing. Like, did you know that, for example, there's a government website that you can look at every single ATIP that's ever been filed? You can look it up. There's Government of Canada will show you they'll tell you every ATIP that's been filed and how many pages the return was. And then you can ask for a copy of that and you'll get it in like 3 days. It's really, it's awesome. I think our community needs to be better armed with that kind of knowledge. So I'll do more on that. So this is Soundwave 14 here, talking about his MP who sits on SECU. Mr. Gannier, who had honestly 2 of the worst questions I've ever seen asked in that committee. He had no idea I would lose my potential inheritance. He said he would take the firearms course. That's interesting. He didn't know. The inheritance thing is something that seems very important to start telling MPs because it's already happening. I've got friends that are RCMP officers, and they are already going to calls with just basically like deceased family, nothing nefarious or anything like that, but they're going to a deceased call. And securing firearms that the family is asking about that the police officers know, like, no, this is Colt 1911. Based on current laws, you can't have this back, and it's a real shame. Alistair voted to keep hunting rifles in scope during SECU. I know I don't know what's going on. The NDP is just, you got to figure, I will admit I was one of the people that seemed duped by them when they moved Alistair into the agriculture committee, and they brought Peter Julian into SECU. I really did think maybe it was a matter of something. I mean, for the record, McGregor kind of lives on a farm, so I thought there was something there, but it kind of seems like maybe it was a move of, you're getting a bit too cozy with gun owners, which, to be clear, for those that don't know, again, because the key, just so everyone understands, I'm very angry about this. But all these things, if I don't come across that way, it's only because I've been doing this for 10 years now. And to be quite blunt, much like the MPs that are in the House, I kind of understand why these people do it. Straight facts. Jagmeet Singh wins the NDP election by a freaking landslide a long time ago. When he won the leadership, it was by a huge margin. The NDP owes the majority of its membership at this point probably to Jagmeet Singh. So Jagmeet Singh, when he becomes a leader and he has this huge groundswell of people that vote for him, it affects the way that party thinks because the people of the party, right? Like at a functional level, a political party is nothing more than an organization of people. So when he wins with 400,000 memberships signed up, those members bring his politics to the NDP table. And that's what effectively also happened with the Liberals, because you'll remember Michael Ignatieff brought the Liberals to their knees, and Justin Trudeau brought them right back with a huge swing in the base. And the Liberal Party, as a result, now reflects Justin Trudeau's Liberals more than it does the Liberal Party, if that makes sense. And Conservatives can, if it doesn't make sense, think of this. When Stephen Harper left, it was the Harper Party, and it's taken this long for the Conservative Party to find itself again. Because when your leader is who everyone is part of that party to support, it's very hard to change it. So the NDP, with what Alistair McGregor is doing now, and I shouldn't even say that because it's not him personally, it's the party he belongs to, and effectively, I guess, I want to say represents, because that's what it feels like. Feels like he represents the NDP. To his constituents, which is backwards. But regardless, that's what it feels like to me. It's because that party is now incredibly shaped by Jagmeet Singh's politics. Now, the problem for Alistair McGregor and Peter Julian and Richard Canning's actually down to the south of me as I gesture to the north. Richard Canning's down south in Penticton is an NDP who won by 300-ish votes in the last election. He will absolutely lose his job as a result of this policy. There's no question. He will lose. Like, there's a group of us in Kelowna that will go help in Penticton to make sure he loses. Like, there's no chance. There are enough gun owners to make him lose. And they don't seem to understand that Richard Canning's could split, to use the example, because he's, I think, actually one of the closest ridings in Canada, and he's NDP. He could split from the NDP sentiment on this and say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going to lose my job. I'm not doing this. I'm not representing my constituents if I vote in favor of this. And then, as a result of that, Richard Canning's would have a better chance of retaining his job after the next election. If he doesn't, he'll lose his job in the next election. That's pretty much a guarantee. And then the guy who he's following, Jagmeet Singh, will also have lost his job because he won't be the leader. Even if he wins the next election, because leaders are very hard to unseat, he will not be the leader months after the next election. The NDP will remove him. So for what? You'll lose your job to help a guy who's done. It makes no sense. And I think that's the other thing the NDP needs to realize, because that's a party that I think I like having three parties in Canada, and I really don't like seeing the NDP just fold itself into this wing of the Liberal government. But the Liberals as well, there's a lot of Liberal MPs, and that's why I keep saying to everyone, email your MP, call them regardless, because you never know what goes on behind the scenes. These are incredibly tight-lipped people. And when they walk into a caucus meeting with tons of their colleagues and they're sitting with all their rural caucus friends talking about, grain prices, ranch issues, and gun policy, the tone may not be what you see in the media or even what they tell you, because you're a constituent, but they're also a member of this party and they have to work with these colleagues. So always email, because you never know what you're dealing with. So always email. Message Alistair a good number of times with C-21. He was one of the few that reacted. Couch and resident. Good to hear, David. Glad to hear you messaging him. Keep it up. I mean, that's the thing. He's saying these things now, but who knows? I mean, I gotta figure he can't have just gone to an IPSC match and seen all this and been like, well, nope, that doesn't matter. So like, keep it up. Keep the pressure on. The other thing too is, I guess, keep the pressure on, because everyone needs to realize that this is not an issue that resolves tomorrow or in a week, or, to be honest, with a Pierre Poilievre election or with a second Pierre Poilievre election. This is an issue that started 12 years ago, probably, when some of the gun politics started first coming up and making headlines. So if we want to win the long game, if we want to retain this hobby and this pastime and these guns, these important objects to us, in the long term, you put the pressure on. You don't let it off, because that's how change happens long term, is water over a rock. It's erosion. You got to keep the pressure on. It's not one quick strike and everything changes. It doesn't work that way. So keep the pressure on, keep the emails on. I am 39, working 60 hours a week to save for down payment. Dude, same. I'm 38. I had to start a second company last year because the gun industry is just not stable enough. So I'm working 2 jobs at 2 companies just to keep the mortgage going. And it's flipping nightmarish. I'm exhausted. I started work, woke up at 5 a.m. this morning and was starting basically then. And it's just, I don't understand how anyone is happy with this government, because everyone I talk to is in the same boat. I am also one of those young people. I'm so sorry, man. Like, it's rough. We moved around. We were basically, me and my now wife, we were boyfriend, girlfriend at the time. We were almost homeless for a little bit there almost. We moved out of Victoria. I had $200. We moved there for 3 months trying to find a house to buy, because Vancouver got too expensive. So we actually rented a house in Victoria to just look at houses for 3 months. That was one of the best times of my life, because Victoria is an amazing city, but also one of the hardest, because like I said, we moved out of there having been outbid on 3 houses, I think it was, or 2 houses, all of which I'm very glad we did not buy. One had a huge crack in the foundation you could see daylight through, such as the housing market and young people's mindsets. And yeah, it was the worst because it came back to $200 and it was awful. Once I got into sports shooting, I left my apartment in downtown Toronto, moved back into my parents so I could afford more toys. Loved every second. Parents are the best, man. That's awesome. They feed you. They usually have nicer houses, better toys. It's awesome. Do you think Alberta's newer firearm legislation will be effective in protecting our property? Yes. I think Alberta's legislation provides a huge buttress. I think Alberta is the canary in the coal mine for gun owners. If the NDP wins in Alberta, we are going... If the NDP wins in Alberta, I'm not going to say that we won't get our AR-15s back, but it's less likely. But because I think it'll be viewed as a bit of a signal. I think a lot of people are keeping an eye on the Alberta election. Also, too, I think Danielle Smith, I'm not going to speak much on it, but having spoken with a few people affiliated with some of the campaigns and all like that, like their CFO is incredible. She's awesome. Like Terry Bryant's like literally a gun doctor, like in terms of like a gun professor, a professor and a Nambu collector. I don't know what better you could want. And they would absolutely fire her right away because they think that's a bad thing. And I just can't. For me, that's one of those, like, every province should have a Dr. Terry Bryant as far as I'm concerned. I am going to do an interview with her at some point, but I want to do it in person because I don't want to do the Zoom things. It's not as cool. So, I'll be door knocking after emailing Gord Johns and still watching him vote against democracy Day. Exactly. That's the way to do it. Always door knock. Never trust NDP. I'm so disappointed. Yeah, today was definitely a day there, AC. The weird thing is I was at the other company all day, so I actually missed most of it. I kind of stepped in at the last minute. I was like, hey, wait, what? Closure? Motion? I thought this was going to reappear next week. I thought we'd have some time, so a bit of a bummer. Montflower, you're in Kelowna. Holy cow, you're now away from me. So you live in Penticton or Vernon, I'm guessing, or less likely Rock Creek. But who knows? Rock Creek, potentially one of the best places to ride a motorcycle to. Alberta for the win. Yeah, Alberta for the win indeed. We're close. We're kind of like Alberta on vacation. That's Kelowna. And really enjoy the channel. Very educated fellow. Thank you. I have an education, I suppose. Do I agree with the CSAAA now? No, but CSAAA, there's an issue. I was going to write an article on it, to be quite honest, when it first started coming up. I don't know how to feel about it. I was on a conference call about it. I don't know. I feel like I understand the mentality because if you're a retailer, like there's a difference between operating capital and dispensable income, right? So if you buy a gun, and this is where it gets super, just so everyone knows, I'm going to say some things, and I don't affiliate myself with either side in this particular thing. I kind of see both. But some people are probably going to get angry. But basically, operating capital for a business is the investment you make in what makes you money. So for Caliber, it's the very real money that we spend on paper. We buy paper and printing services and mailing and packaging and content, and that's our operating capital. If someone were to take our operating capital from us, it would reduce our ability to earn more money in the future. It kind of cripples you. You have to start from scratch. Disposable income is exactly that. You can donate it and it doesn't really affect your lifestyle in a meaningful way because it's recreational, right? This is where I'll say I personally think these are both incredibly important things. I have a lot of cars and motorcycles that prove I value disposable income tremendously. But businesses also value operating capital tremendously. And when you've got 100,000 or more in rifles that are prohibited, even if you got $10,000 in rifles that are prohibited, if you're a gun shop, $10,000 might be 2 months worth of your lease and insurance costs. You know, that's a decent chunk of your annual operating. So businesses have been able to write these guns off against their taxes because they're not an asset anymore. They're illegal effectively. So there have been some accounting benefits to business. Some businesses have probably not taken advantage of those. so be it. Some probably can't because of certain reasons. I have no idea. I'm not an accountant. But there are some things that have happened for businesses. This is, I get it, because if I owned this is where it gets tricky, is I'm a guy who owns a company in the industry who also owns AR-15s. So on one hand, I go, I had to start a second company to make ends meet. My wife still wants a garden. We had a second kid. I could really use the money from those AR-15s. But I'm not going to do that. Like, it's not even possible. If it was, I probably still wouldn't, because I'm just one of those kind of ride or die, ride out the amnesty guys. But if it was a business and that was literally like $10,000 and it was like months and months of rent or numerous employees' salary, it would shift the logic for me. Because if I was looking at it going, well, it's getting tough, because admittedly the gun industry is getting tough for multiple reasons, both regulatory as well as there's a giant war going on that's consuming a ton of guns and ammunition right now, making it hard to get ammunition, which is kind of the gas of our entire industry. If no one can get ammo, no one can shoot, no one can buy guns. So there's a lot of factors that are really hurting gun shops: leases, commercial lease prices, insurance, all going up. So it would change the math. Or if I was for a private citizen, I feel like the responsible thing to do is to keep them until the end of the amnesty as long as possible. Make the government make me give it up effectively. Not, like I said, please don't kick my door in the RCMP, but like, you know what I mean? But if I was a retailer, I'd almost feel like the responsible thing to do, if I was having like a hard time paying the bills, goodbye, Graydon. Next time I'm over on the island, I'll swing by your shop and say hi. And I'll send my buddy over there next time Bizarre needs some work. Thanks for saying bye. Thanks for saying hello there. If I was a shop owner though, and it was like the 10 grand was really going to help my employees get paid or something, I'd have a hard time not seeing the merit in that, or feeling like that was a responsible or ethical thing to do. So I see both. It's very tough. There's a few things. I do think there's an issue with regards to the CSAAA and the fact that, and this hasn't been spoken of too much, but the $700,000 that they were, or whatever it was, 700 and some thousand, whatever dollars the contract was, would actually represent a dramatic shift in the CSAAA's funding from an industry funded organization to a government funded organization. And that I think it's one of those things where I'm not a lawyer, and I don't think there is a law. Like, to be clear, I am not alleging that there's anything against this. I think it's entirely above board. I just think it's one of those, when I was like a gun club president, which is my only experience on boards like this, there's like the rules, which, like you can do whatever you want within the rules. But then there's just kind of like doing the right thing. And, like, to get around to another thing that we've discussed in a previous year that some people brought up, we discussed boycotting the police at our gun club, because the gun club that I ran here in Kelowna is the range where the local ERT, RCMP, sniper teams, etc. train at. When we discussed boycotting that, the executives absolutely had the ability to just be like, no, we're going to do whatever we want. But we thought it was an important issue, because everyone lives in the community. If the police can't train with their firearms in this community, then they aren't as safe as police officers, and that makes all of us less safe. So we thought, I thought as president, we got to put the question to the club and let everyone hear this question, and let everyone answer that shows up to a meeting. Like, and the money, I understand, was not really divulged to a lot of people. It wasn't the membership. The board the contract was made available to the board before the vote. It wasn't necessarily potentially raised in the most clear manner. Some of the clauses in there, specifically the clause about providing information on non-compliant businesses, was not provided to board members. And then members at large, of which I am not one, again, to be clear, they kicked me out years ago. Not that I'm literally not bitter. It's just a rules thing. But the members weren't told. And I think when you're going to take an organization that is a industry funded, especially as important as it's the gun industry, we got nothing. Like, as a gun industry member, the CSAAA is the only industry representation we have. There's literally no one else that gives two craps about us. The Canadian, the small business people, they kind of do, but like they're never gonna go and make a press release saying, "Hey, you shouldn't ban these guns because it's gonna put 45,000 people out of work." That's not what they do, because guns are so politicized. They're the only people. And I feel like to take the only entity we've got as an industry and to go, okay, well, we make like, a few $100,000 off of industry donations every year. If that, I don't even know if it's that. And then we're going to make 700 some thousand off the government. There's a shift there. I feel like there's a very dramatic, you can't take, you work for the government. I don't know how else to put it. I guess to cut straight to the chase, you work for the government. You are a government liaison organization with the industry at that point. And I think that question, which is probably needed, to be clear, this is where I say, I don't really have a strong opinion either way, because there probably does need to be something like that. I just kind of wish they hadn't volunteered for it per se, and there'd been more transparency around it. I also kind of wish that 3 years ago they had just gone to KPMG and said, let's get a forensic audit of the industry's newly prohibited inventory and work on a giant report that they could have provided to the Conservatives or the PBO or Parliament as a giant piece of ammunition of, okay, well, you want us to produce a report for you on this prohibited inventory? Handy, we've already got one. Because if they'd produce it themselves, they would control the data. KPMG would work for them, so they would be able to say things like, no, we won't tell you who owns these guns or where they are. We will just tell you how many of them there are out there. And I think as a member of the industry, that was our one chance to get that number out there, because there was a chance for gun shops to tell the industry organization or an auditor that's working for them, I have this many M14s in my back room right now. Right now, I don't know. I think that's less likely. Sure, most of them will, because of course BFLs, you got to be inspected, all that kind of thing. But for every big city store that deals with inspections, there's two tiny rural ones that are on the fringe of our regulatory assets, and are a lot less stringent in that sort of thing. So you're going to see more filtering of firearms that way. And the whole thing's a mess. Just got a 5-gallon tub of Cosmoline. Fun fact, we have a bunch of pieces of rebar coated in the various kinds of rust protectant that are sitting outside in our garden, rusting, to test which one works best. And you can assume why we are running a test of rust protectants. Very fun. CSAAA switch hitter to stay alive. I'd say they chose the wrong side. I would kind of agree. I think I'm not a retailer. I don't do retail. I have a service business in the automotive sector, and I've got a magazine, and neither of which are retail. But my marketing brain says that in this particular industry, there is nothing more important than credibility. It's why we have tried to maintain it so freaking hard, and losing it is a death knell. I've seen companies lose it and it's over. It doesn't matter if it's credibility insofar as even just like maintaining fair pricing or anything else. There's no patience for that kind of thing. It's concerning. I get CSAAA reasoning, but don't agree with them trying to make things as smooth. I totally agree. So there's one thing that was said on the call, and like it kind of kills me to say it, because I'm not going to say who, but like basically someone kind of intimated that the reason that the CSAAA signed this agreement was because they were best positioned to do so. And I think what was intended was like that what was pitched was, we need to know how many illegal guns are out there and what they're worth. And the industry said, well, we're the best people to know that, which they are. Like, let's just be reasonable here. Like, reality says that's the case. But reality also says, if that's the case, then you should also not be the ones that sign up to help them. Right? And there was a little bit of an additional side logic of the big argument was, well, if we didn't sign up with it, we were very concerned, we being the CSAAA, again, of which I am not a member, that the CSAAA felt that if another entity was to take over. The government would have to get someone to do this. They got to find out how many guns they banned and what they're worth at industry levels. Like it's the private guns they don't ever need to really come after. The Canadian population will be totally okay with incredibly low compliance rates on like civilian owned guns, but businesses less so. Plus businesses don't want to have them, so they got to deal with it. So they will need to have this done eventually. The thing is, it's kind of like if IBM did it, for example, if that was the next call the government made, was just, hey, we'll call IBM. IBM would just call CSAAA immediately after. They'd say, well, we've got this contract to do this report for the government. You're the gun industry. How many guns you got? And it's kind of like, well, wouldn't that have worked just as well? Do you think the government's going to be better with you than they were with IBM? Because IBM, to me, sounds like an independent third party. Who knows? There's so much to this. Also, too, as with all these things, there's always an additional 10 to 20% that you don't know. I don't know. I know quite a bit about the CSAAA in this particular issue. I've listened to the phone calls. I've asked for comment because, like I said, I was going to write an article, and it kind of flamed out because once I got the comment, I went, yeah, I think I don't know if this is necessarily a story. But it's certainly interesting, I suppose, because I think it speaks to people's mindset more than outcomes, perhaps. But I'm not a big fan of it. And I also think it's a huge distraction at a time when, like, I saw stuff today on social media about CSAAA and yesterday. Honestly, guys, who cares? Like, it's a tiny industry organization that's, it helps out sometimes, whatever, who cares? Move on. We got bigger fish to fry. Like, we have a really big fish to fry. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Took my FALs, now my R's never ends. Yeah, that's the thing. The older folks that have guns, these guys that have lost guns in the first bans, I feel so bad. And now I kind of understand what they're going through. And man, that's a disheartening thought to think of. Because when you think about the fact that we are the second generation of people to lose guns in this fashion, and to lose guns in a fashion that's more draconian. At least the first bans were, well, no, they were through regulation as well, because they did the same thing. Those that don't know, the first bans, they introduced legislation, and then the regulations came after. And the legislation said the guns that the regulations determined to be prohibited will basically be prohibited. And then because regulations don't require a vote, they just went, boop, there are the regulations, and your FAL was prohibited. So it was rough. I voted Lib so long ago, and yes, Justin got in, never again. It's hard to tell with the YouTube algorithm, but I believe that the Conservatives are going to be getting more votes than ever before. I agree. I had a very interesting conversation about this. As someone that works in this particular field, things are changing. By that, I mean like media and media censorship around political issues. David, got to head out early morning tomorrow. Thanks, Daniel. Keep it up. I'm serious about PMing me about the old bike. We can work out a little trade maybe. All right, David, I'll shoot you a message. I'm curious what the old bike is. I got a few things to trade. I love my motorcycles. Thanks for stopping by, though, David. It was nice to chit chat. Yeah, I think it's so we don't run a TikTok because I have some concerns about that platform, obviously, but we're pretty prolific on Twitter, obviously getting involved in YouTube now, and have been somewhat in the past, and obviously been on Facebook forever, since day one. And man alive, the social media road trip we've been on has been wild. Like, in the early days, Twitter was actually one of the most restrictive. If you talked about firearms and stuff like that, the throttling was very severe. And I'm talking about going back to the Jack ownership, Jack Dorsey period. It was incredibly restrictive. So in the early days when I first started Caliber, I would make a post on Twitter and make a post on Facebook, and Facebook would go nuts and Twitter would go nowhere. Like, I would get like 2 to 3 digits of people. Whereas Facebook, I get 4 to 5. And Facebook, because Caliber is now 11 years old, so probably for the first 3 years, Facebook was insane. Like, I was we would have posts on Facebook where we would have a follower. I think we had a posting where we had a follower base of about 11 or 15,000, somewhere in there. And we had a post that went out, and it would be very common where the reach would dramatically exceed your follower count. So we'd have a follower count of like 11,000, and a post would reach 60,000 people. And these would be straight gun posts, like just straight up, read a review of this, or, a meme about this, or something about liberals, who knows? But like, there'd be lots of stuff that would go nuts on Facebook, and it's totally inverted now. Whereas on Twitter, The video that I made yesterday, if you look at the metrics, which you can now see, I think on Facebook and Twitter, I know you can on Twitter. I don't know where it was, but within a few minutes of posting it on Twitter, like 20 or 30 or something like that, it had 10,000 views on Twitter. When I looked at it, and at the exact same time, I went over to Facebook, and when I looked at Facebook, the exact same video had like 632, I think it was. Like a factoral level lower. And that has been if you're wondering why we don't post on Facebook anymore, that is literally why. I put Facebook posts out there. We now have a follower base of over 25,000 people. I have put posts out that have been seen by 12 people on Facebook. And I mean, if you follow us on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else, you know that I'm not posting rabid, insane alt-right nut job theories or the earth is flat or anything offensive whatsoever. We report on gun news and gun politics and policy from a gun owner's perspective. But holy moly, Facebook, the throttling and the censorship on social media platforms for the recent memories have been nut. Now, I will say you are right. Things have been changing a bit. Facebook is still terrible. Facebook is terrible. It's why this video is on YouTube. Quite literally, the only reason why is not only do we do terrible numbers on Facebook, but I also don't want to support it anymore because I have told numerous of our advertisers, and this is something I tell gun owners too, these social media networks, we invest a huge amounts of our time in. All of us do. Every one of you that's watching this video has invested an hour and 1 minute of your life watching a video on a YouTube channel. That's an investment in this network. That network has every right, it's privately operated, to delete all of this, period. And I'm not really interested in investing in networks and channels where I'm going to put the effort into putting content onto their media networks that grows their network and brings eyeballs, that will then turn around and do what we've seen Google do. I mean, geez, you want to see a funny response to social media networks these days. Go try and run a Google AdWords ad for a gun magazine. It has two problems with that. And you literally can't get around it. I've had to get people on the phone to say it's a paper thing. It's not a thing that the rounds go in. It's a paper thing about firearms. And then they say, yeah, it doesn't matter. We also won't allow you to advertise that. So it's very, there's part of me that just wants, I knew it. I saw that Habs. So RV is a friend of mine, also a contributor to the magazine occasionally. So yeah, there's your reaction, Richard. You know, little so-and-so. Anyways, yeah, it is changing. Regardless of your opinion on Elon Musk, because I've had many opinions of Elon Musk, Twitter has changed dramatically since his ownership and is, I think, probably going to kind of set a trend for a lot of these social media networks to hopefully find a center again. Hopefully, I'd love to. There's absolutely no logic in the UN Small Arms Treaty as well as Sustainable Development. Yeah, the UN stuff I don't really follow anymore. I got to head out early morning tomorrow. Oh, that's David. Yep. Saw your first video yesterday, and I truly enjoyed listening, and so glad I caught the live chat. And I'm OBC Millwright. Keep up the amazing work. Hopefully, we'll catch you next live. Jim, thanks for stopping by. Always nice to see another BC guy. Nanaimo is a lovely town. We've got a couple folks over there in Nanaimo that we are pretty good friends with. And I always love chatting with a millwright because I like nothing more than machining steel. I know I'm weird that way. Truth, logic, and common sense, the antithesis of Liberal Party ideologues. I would argue yes. So that's not really an argument. That's an agreement. Ideologues have kind of become the problem overall, I think. There's not a lot of pragmatism in politics anymore. It's just about what tribe you belong to. And I think gunners are subject to that in the same way. There's been a lot of tribalism, and I think it's pretty caustic. We got to get back to a kind of pragmatic center. I'm new here, but any thoughts on what happens when the Liberals reform the Canadian Firearms within 1-2 months as promised? Yes, Mark. They will ban a metric ton of guns. To cut straight to the chase. So Marco Medicino promised in his speech when he introduced all these new amendments and whatnot to C-21, he specified that the Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee, CFAC, would be reconstituted, and that the committee would be asked to make recommendations on existing firearms on the market that are too dangerous to own and should be prohibited. These firearms include, we can assume, the SKS based on a debate in the House of Commons yesterday that specifically mentioned the SKS, in which the Liberal Party Parliamentary Secretary for Public Safety said that the Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee would specifically look at the SKS because it isn't captured by the legislative definition, but is something that they wanted to look at. So I said it earlier in the live stream, but for those that are coming back, the new C-21 bill, the definition provided in that bill that bans everything moving forward. Think of it as the legislation bans everything moving forward. CFAC bans everything moving backwards. So all the existing stuff, that the idea of grandfathering that's been put out there, this notion that they won't ban anything backwards, it's not true. CFAC will do that. They have promised it effectively. Well, not even effectively. They have promised it. It's in writing. If you go to the government website at the bottom on one of their bulletin points, CFAC will make recommendations. The Bloc Québécois is kind of cutting straight to the chase, where their public safety critic, Christina Michaud, and I apologize for murdering that pronunciation, but I don't speak French, unfortunately, yet. Christina Michaud is specifically actually going to Marco Mendicino and asking him to constitute that committee faster, because the Bloc Québécois wants to see assault-style firearms banned by decree faster, aka OIC. So it's an open secret at this point that CFAC is just G46 amendments without some. What I expect to see, to be quite honest, is I had actually expected to see CFAC ban everything that G46 banned, except for the Browning BAR and the Ruger number 1. And the SKS, I thought they'd keep that off. But after that debate in the House of Commons yesterday between Pam Damoff and Elizabeth May, specifically about the SKS, I think we can assume the SKS is going to be banned as well. Yeah, same here. Came across the channel a few days ago. Subscribe here. Thank you for the subscription. And thank you for the magazine subscription too. So for those of you that don't know, you can subscribe to the channel, which is awesome. But we also have an actual print magazine that we make. It's been on a slight sabbatical on account of paper prices and me having a child, but we're working on the next issue right now, and it's going to print shortly. So yeah, if you want to subscribe to that, go for it. It's what kind of keeps us going and pays the bills. It's a little bit different than the content here. It's usually, there's political, obviously, but it's a bit more in depth. It's written. So it gets into some pretty big depth and a lot of historical content, a lot of pretty pictures, because I take photography quite seriously. Bats 888, buddy, what's up? I see you on Twitter and Reddit all the time. For those that don't know, one of the more prolific posters on guns on social media. I noticed gun content on YouTube via my YouTube channel. That's account can spread quickly, then stop, then start to grow. Yeah, I've noticed that too. So if Facebook throttles us incredibly severely, which I found, and Twitter is now becoming the land of milk and honey, YouTube is mercurial. It follows the trends. The reason this video is entitled C-21 is because if C-21 is in anything right now, it goes nuts on YouTube, and much more so than on Twitter. Like, everything is subjected to trends. Like, when we do videos on political trends, yes, it goes way higher than a video on reviewing a pen, a gun, a watch, whatever, because it's trending. But the trending factor so far seems to be magnified on YouTube, is I guess how I would put it. I suspect that it will probably stabilize as the algorithm kind of figures out what we are, but and I also kind of wonder if it's the recent influx of this content that's come out, because in the past it's really been like, you had NRA TV, Colio Noir, you had obviously CCFR, you had Rod Giltaka's channel, but you didn't really have much out there. And now there's so much, and the volume of content that's being produced, like, you see things like, to be quite honest, I think things like in Canada, I see him in the chat, so I'm just going to give him the nod. It's guys like Travis Bader that inspire guys like me to say, hey, I can do this too. Like, just put your nose to the grindstone and try. In the States, it's guys like Grantham that are knocking stuff out that's like straight up Top Gear quality, like Top Gear of 10 years ago and Grantham gun reviews. That's the same level of stuff. And if they're bringing their game up to here, there's going to be a backfill of us crappier content producers that go, we can do this too, and not to the same level, but by God, we're going to be here and trying. So I think the algorithms are struggling to deal with that. It's going to be very interesting. You can touch base with Travis Bader and Silvercore. I did touch base with Travis Bader and Silvercore. Give them an update. Oh, geez. I need to. Funny enough, that's where I got my license. I got my license from Silvercore. So I have been in contact with Travis Bader since day one of being a gun owner, actually. Having got my license when I was there in Tawasin. My question is, how will these be banned, such as the X95, which I own? Will they be bought back or just ordered to store them and wait for the orders? I don't know. I suspect this government doesn't seem to show a huge penchant for grandfathering, so I suspect that would be out. They have created a bit of a precedence with the buyback, but they've set a really shitty precedence for the buyback where you might get, $1,000 for your Tavor. So I would say my knowledge for gun owners is if you're worried about bills and stuff, do not buy a gun. It shouldn't be said. And I know I work in marketing and I sell gun ads, but if you're worried about making rent, don't buy a gun. Go pay your rent. Go buy some food. Go buy a nice suit, get a good resume, etc. Do these things. If you have guns and you're not worried about making rent, then own your guns and don't worry about it too much. Like I said earlier, a lot of this stuff seems to kind of be the groundwork for either a proroguement or an election or both, in which case everything's going to change. And I mean, too, with the Tavor, if someone had a Tavor, there's no way to know if they had a Tavor. So long story short, just wait, see how things shake out. I do expect that if C-21 will pass in the next couple days, I will expect that. So just so everyone knows, it was August 28th is the date that Marco Medicino has asked for CFAC to have their recommendations back. Hence why I say wait, because if there's a proroguement coming, it likely seems to be coming over this foreign influence issue, which is entirely outside of my scope. And I have opinions on it, obviously, but their opinions, it's not something I follow closely enough to report on. So that's all I can say, basically, because it seems like they're going to prorogue around the foreign interference thing. And then Marco Mendicino's decision to say, hey, I want to have CFAC's recommendations for OIC ban by August 28th puts it pretty close to the fall election cycle time. So we'll see how that shakes out. Caliber, I haven't sold a firearm since the long gun registry was introduced last May. Do you think it's worth buying a lever 45, 70, 30, 30 at this point? Yes, absolutely. Why? Because lever guns are awesome, dude. And those are classic lever guns. 45, 70. I'm a 30, 30. Actually, I'm neither of those, to be quite honest. I like 45, 70, and I own one. I'm going to be selling it soon. So anyone that's still in the channel, God bless all of you that are still watching this, by the way. We'll be doing a garage sale soon. In which I'm going to be selling some of our personal firearms because paper prices have gone up 44%, and we got to make a magazine. So it's not a company sale, RCMP or anyone else watching this. It's just me selling some of my personal guns. And we're going to sell off, we got a ton of gear that we've collected in 10 years, like Haley, HSP, Haley Partners or whatever. Oh God, Richard, no RCMP here. Yeah, right. We don't know. Chest rigs and all this stuff we've been testing for a long time that we don't use as much anymore. So we're just going to do a garage sale, including back issues. In that garage sale will be my 4570. It's an older Remlin one, which I know is not helping me sell it, unfortunately. I would totally, I'm a big Savage 99 guy. As anyone that reads the magazine knows, I know they don't look as attractive as a Winchester or even a Browning, but you open up the action on one of those Savage 99s and you look in the top and you look at the machining in the rotary magazine and the brain power that Arthur Savage put into that gun. The Winchester Model 12 is very famously a gun that went out of production because Winchester could no longer afford to produce it. The mill work involved in making a Winchester Model 12, it is borderline a custom gun. If you're into handguns and stuff, a Winchester Model 12 on the production line in the 1940s or 50s was effectively a semi-custom gun. A ton of the parts were machine made and then hand fit. which makes owning a Model 12 in the current age a total pain in the butt because you just can't buy a part off the shelf and drop it in a lot of cases. But it also makes them incredibly nice guns to own because like everything fits together like butter. Like you can rack up a Model 12 in a gun rack, and I swear, like 99% of Model 12s that have been properly clean and lubed, you poke the action release and the pump just slides open because of the way they're made. The Savage 99 is one of those guns. It's made that same level. They stopped making it because it was too expensive. It was a little bit European style. It has a bit of a weird floor, and there's a schnabel to it and stuff. It's different. It carries incredibly well in the hand. The rotary magazine keeps the rounds in your hand, so there's no balance issues. So my choice would be, is it worth buying a lever in 45-70 or 30-30 at this point? Absolutely. But it's also probably worth taking a look at a Savage Model 99 in ideally 308 or 300 Savage. You get a Spitzer bullet. You get a classic firearm that is made in a way that no other gun is made today. And the feature set honestly kind of makes buying a Savage 99 a bit like buying a new gun because you can choose all these various things. Like there's a takedown model, there's octagonal barrel models, there's schnabel forend models. There's some weird custom full stock models out there. There are ones with different stocks. There are Prince of Wales grips. There's English stocks. There are ones with round counters in the side where a little brass round shows you how many rounds you got left. There's a ton of features. That's what I'd go for. I love lever guns. That's my favorite personal lever gun. There's some other really cool lever guns, but the Savage 99 is my favorite. If you don't own a lever, then you definitely need to own a lever. If you definitely need to have a 45-70 or 30-30, I would probably go with a 45-70. There's a lot more versatility to that round than 30-30. 30-30 is kind of, it's a super fun round. It is a really fun round. It's super light recoiling. If you're recoil averse, it's great, but 45-70 can do a ton. You can load that thing up, and I mean, it's a T-Rex gun at the top end, and it's a pretty decent normal hunting gun at the bottom end if you hand load. If you don't hand load, different ballgame. Then either way, Savage 99. That's the way to go. Can't believe the red flags laws went through unamended, even though Polly recommended not to. Yeah, there's something about those red flag laws and the way that they're being treated by the government, specifically the red flag laws and how they're acting around them. They went through unamended, even though a ton of people opposed them. And I wonder if there's something around that I have no reason to expect this or anything. It's just kind of weird. I wonder if the government doesn't expect this to pass. Like call me crazy, but does anyone else kind of feel like with what's been going on with C-21, G4, G46, these amendments, the motion to limit debate, closure, red flag passing unamended today, that the Liberal and NDP coalition sort of just have the idea of like, just, excuse my language, I'm not going to swear because I think it's bad for YouTube, but friggin' get this through because we just got to get it to the Senate. We'll keep it there. We'll prorogue. We'll elect. We'll go to an election, and we'll use this as an election wedge. It's very strange. So I'm kind of interested in that because those red flag blocks make no sense. It makes no sense. And when you see a government full of people that, to be quite honest, like some of them have to be intelligent, most of them should be rational. When they all do something that makes no intelligent, rational sense, you got to be kind of going like, well, why would they? And the only reason you can come up with is, well, maybe it fulfills a different purpose than actually making this into law. Buying a gun right now, you can't trust what is banned tomorrow since it's okay today. No, you absolutely can't. So just go buy what you want. It's the way to do it. Honest to God. Like, there's no reason not to, honest. It's just, it is what it is. Like I said, don't buy anything you can't afford to lose, of course. But don't let the fear get the best of you. It's just silly. I see on Reddit a lot. How do you feel about people trying to pressure others into buying semi-autos? Doesn't feel right when people are asking because they're worried. No, I don't think, like, if someone is worried, if someone came up to me and said, hey, Dan, I kind of want a semi-auto, but I'm worried they're banned, I would just kind of say, oh, it's a budgetary issue. It's not it just comes down to like, would you buy a Slurpee tomorrow if you were worried they were going to be banned? Yeah, of course you would, because you're like, it's $4 and I'll probably drink it before they ban it. Will you buy your gun and enjoy it before they ban it? And if they ban it, will the cash hurt you? I don't know. I can't answer that for everyone. I only know for me, there are certainly guns. For example, I'll just be straight up. When the handgun ban happened and they passed that, I sold my Lago Alien. I own like most of the guns that have been reviewed in the magazine. I don't know if you guys know this, but like most of the guns we own. Like I bought the Alien, most expensive. One of the few guns that I haven't bought was the I can't remember the name. It's been so long now, but it was that big bullpup 50 cal. It was like $15,000. They couldn't afford that. But like if we bought the Alien, because it's just how most of the guns, it seems fair to me. It's like if I'm going to review a gun, I should probably just buy it because otherwise I'm taking a freebie, right? So when that ban passed, my wife legitimately, our backyard was in pretty rough shape. We had a 1-year-old who wants to run around the backyard. She wanted a garden, and like I've said numerous times, gun industry ain't exactly a ton of fun these days. I had to make a call. So I sold my Lego Alien because I went, if this is going to be prohibited, I don't think I can afford to have this much money tied up in it. And that's just a personal thing. I'm a young guy with kids. I can't afford that much money. It's a ton of money to be tied up. I have other handguns still that I can afford to have an M&P 9 tied up. I can afford to have a Browning Buckmark tied up. So I think that's where that's where I said earlier, gun owners have to be careful of the tribalism and the same partisanship and just to be blunt, the lack of understanding. Recognize that when some guy is on Reddit saying, well, like I would love to buy a semi-auto, but I'm just scared they're going to be banned. You don't know if that guy's eating ramen like every night to get by because that's all he can afford. Or if they're a student that's racked up a huge amount of debt and is desperately trying to figure out somewhere to live next year when they graduate. So I would just say everyone's got to just chill. Gun owners have to let gun owners be gun owners and own the guns they want to own for the reasons they want to own them, period. The same reason that if someone says to me, hey, I would love to own a M249, cool, go for it. It's not my personal gun. I wouldn't own one. But if you want to, I would never question your desire to. I just want to make sure you're safe when you do it. If someone says, I'd love to own a semi-auto, but I'm worried they're going to be banned, cool. I hope one day you can be less worried, that we have a government that gives you the confidence to buy one, or that your financial circumstance changes such that your concern becomes lessened. That's what gun owners need to do. They got to stop telling other people what to do. I have no time for gun owners that can't practice what they preach in that particular regard. And I'll say this as well, just to get back to the CSAAA. Our community has had a constant issue with fracturing since as long as I've been in it. Back when we had issues with the CSSA and the NFA, dating back to the Sean Bevins age, which was like a little bit of a golden age for firearms advocacy in some ways. Our community has constantly fought one another. And the CSAAA thing is a really good example of that, where I know a lot of people have differing opinions on it. Like I've said numerous times, I don't really have a strong opinion on it. I understand both sides incredibly easily. But at the end of the day, I don't think everyone should have to understand both sides. They should just be able to understand. You can't stand up as a community and say, we need to be unified. We need to work together. We need to stick together, or we're going to see the end of this entire thing at the hands of the government. And then the second an industry organization does something that is questionable, not wrong, to be quite clear, questionable, because they're an organization. They can do whatever the hell they want. You're not a member of them. I'm not a member of them. They can do whatever they want. Their members dictate what they do. If their members decide this is what that organization wants to do, then it's not wrong for them to do it. As gun owners, we can question that decision, but we can't say they're wrong to do it. That's projecting. That's really what that is. And that's not the unity. That's literally the opposite. You can't say, hey, let's all work together. Let's all stick together. Let's be all one. We're going to have all these organizations that work together. And then the second one of them makes what some have construed as a misstep, a questionable decision, something that other people don't like. You throw them under the freaking bus within 5 seconds. Well, that's not unity, guys. Like, come on, be better. Like, literally be better. If you see someone in the gun community saying, hey, I'm worried about buying a semi-auto because of the ban, don't think they're a shittier gun owner than you because you own a semi-auto. Newsflash, anyone with a bank account can own a semi-auto. And no, you don't even need a PAL these days. Anyone with a bank account can own a semi-auto firearm in this country. It is not a point of pride, guys. It is not something to be proud of. So if you hear someone say that, don't rag on them. Give them confidence. Give them a hand up. Say like, hey, you know what? Me too. I'm worried my semi-autos are going to be banned. I am. Who isn't? Like, it's just stupid. So there's my rant for the day. God. Yes, about back issues. Feel free to email me for back issues if you want them. I have far too much inventory. Richard has lots of back issues when we do the garage sale. Richard does our circulation management, by the way. He does all of our magazine mailing. We're sending him a bunch of issues and a mailing machine, which we signed the rental agreement for today to get those back issues out the door. What about owners of the Ruger number one? Ruger number one owners, I think, will be fine, to be quite honest. I don't think that one's going to be lumped back into the ban. Caliber Magazine is an incredible publication. Thank you for flying the flag for firearms owners in Canada. Keep up the great work. 30-30 all day. Fair point. Okay, I'm always down. 30-30 is a nice round. I did own. I don't actually. Nope, don't own a 30-30. I had my Winchester PCMRC Pacific Coast Militia Ranger rifle, which was in the magazine a while ago. That was another one that got sacrificed to the wife's garden in the backyard, unfortunately. Jeremiah Coles, Jotted Jet. Unfortunately, I think I probably missed you there, Jeremiah, because that was an old message, but thanks for stopping by. Andrew Bohr, is it still worth buying Ruger number one, even if they're banned? Oh, that was, buy Ruger number one, they're not going to be banned. I think a lot of people thought the same with C11, and look at it now, it's hard to be optimistic. Yeah, C11's concerning, admittedly. That one, I could go off on some conspiracy theorist tangents there, but I really can't figure out why C11 needed to be passed. And again, one of those, nothing bothers me more than seeing someone do something that doesn't appear to be in their best interest, because I find it incredibly disconcerting because I can't figure it out. I just expect people to act in their own best interest, and to watch the government pass C11, which was so, no one likes C11, like literally no one. I don't understand why they do, and I think I'm very curious to see that one. Way of the Wind, I wonder. I don't know Way of the Wind. That's a very specific question. If they won't amend the section, I mean, maybe. I guess we'll have to see if they will amend that. There's only 5 minutes per party. So anything they amend from now on, you can probably assume is going to be on rails, like a prefab amendment agreed to in backrooms. Do you have a handgun that you purchased because of the freeze that you now regret? That's how I am with the VIS 100. No, because I did not buy any handguns during the handgun freeze because prices went absolutely nuts. And to be quite blunt, I expect the handgun freeze to be reversed. I'm an optimist that way. Ryan, I bought an X95 myself. Kids are eating ramen. I just, yeah, X95 ramen. It's a decision. It's a decision. Make sure your kids eat some veggies there. Throw in some good carrots and stuff. In the 2020 OIC ban, apparently rocket launchers like TOM and there is no story about that. They did ban those. In Canada, you could own pretty much anything that launched an explodey thing. I know a guy that owns a tank. Back when I worked in automotive testing, I tested drove around a T-55 Soviet tank in Chilliwack. That if you've seen a bunch of X-Men movies, you've seen it. He can own the gun. And I actually asked him about it. The gun breech was welded up, so it couldn't move. And I asked him about that, and he said, no, I could completely clean that up and make the gun functional again. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a non-restricted, very long-barreled, very large caliber gun. But utterly impossible to get the rounds for. Kind of like trying to buy a grenade. You just can't. So all that stuff was legal. You could go out and buy a tow launcher. I know people with tow launchers because it's just the tube, right? Like it's just the launcher. It's just a tube. There's lots of people, lots of legions and stuff that have rocket launcher tubes and stuff like that up on a wall, like pits and stuff like that. But you couldn't get a rocket, right? And what point is it like rocket? Like what point is having a rocket propelled grenade launcher tube? If you can't get the RPG part, it's just a tube. So they did ban all those. It also included a bunch of artillery and mortars, which hasn't been brought up, but I'm straight up still wondering how the 9 o'clock gun is firing in Vancouver. For those that don't know, there's a gun in Stanley Park that used to be used to signal the ships in Vancouver Harbor. They'd fire a gun in Stanley Park at 9 o'clock so that the ships could set their clocks. That gun still goes off. It's a giant black powder cannon in a big glass greenhouse. It definitely exceeds maybe it's black powder. I don't know, but it's still shooting. I don't understand how it works, but it's definitely bigger than the 20 millimeter bore requirement. Wait, are X95 banned yet? X95 is not banned yet. Is there an echo in here? Do you think mare's leg will be banned? Were they on the previous amendment ban? No, mare's legs were not. I do know that's a gun that some regulators don't like because there's a certain subset of liberal caucus and even conservative caucus, all the caucuses, that has an issue with concealable firearms. Same reason I've been told our 4.2 inch barrel requirement, we're always going to have that 0.2 for some reason, because apparently Canadian politicians think that's what keeps them safe. And why a lot of even the conservative movements around simplified classification system and stuff have revolved around things like overall length limits and stuff, because there's a very real issue around basically what I've been told is that former law enforcement caucus, police caucus, doesn't like concealable stuff. So they don't like the mare's leg that way, but it's a lever gun. And it's a niche lever gun, so it's not something that I think anyone is really taking a harsh look at. Cynicism is the way it is. It has been the way for a long time, but man, does it erode your spirit something fierce after a little while. Bought a Raven 5.56 waiting for patiently. That's a weird way for me to pronounce that word. Hoping to give it a go before they ban semi-autos. Would I be able to still shoot on my property? If they ban it, no. So if they ban it, it'll be like the M14s and stuff like that. You'll be holding it probably, unless they ban it and say, no, we're going to make a new class. Who freaking knows at this point what this government's doing? Because I don't even know if they know what they're doing. It seems like every week is a new answer, which does relate to, I mean, I've heard even this from years ago, back when I had contacts in public safety, because to be clear, when Ralph Goodale was public safety minister, they called me, like their office straight up. It's weird now, actually, because I haven't thought of this in years. But like they've just phoned me out of the blue a few times. Be like, hey, what do you think of this and that? And there was, dare I say, good governance back then. But one thing that was consistent was that there wasn't a lot of experience on the policy side. There was a couple guys, one guy in particular did kind of know what he was talking about in a good way. But even he kind of said a lot of the other ones don't. And they have a lot of misconceptions. This individual had a pal, owned firearms, owned handguns, knew all the rules, and kind of intimated that other people on staff were less aware, and people that were really important to the gun file were really unaware of these things and would consult with him to try and get information. He no longer works there, and I suspect that he's left a void. And that's where I think they don't know what they're doing, because from what I've been told repeatedly, that void after he left them kind of rudderless. And now it's like week to week is, what do we want? What do we want? What are we doing? And they're dealing with a lot of inputs from Police Saint-Souvian, Doctors for Protection from Guns, random shootings that occur in the States that politicians want to take advantage of in Canada, that we've seen random shootings that occur in Canada that politicians want to take advantage of. That has created a situation in public safety around firearms where the policy is very frenetic. There is no long-term narrative of, here are our goals and here are how we're going to get there. It's, oh, this happened, this could help. And I think that really does kind of follow. Also curious to hear about the Raven 5.56. I think I'm going to try and get my hands on one of those for testing in a future issue. I don't expect it to be banned over the summer, and we'll get one by then. So Bats, do you think they take off the GSG 15, 16, the 22s? They've been adamant about it. Yeah, I don't know. Part of me, I don't know if the GSGs will be the linchpin of 22s. Pixel says GSG 22s rimfire. So when you say that, the problem is that G46 did. The previous amendment to C-21, the one that was withdrawn, the two of them, G46 did ban rimfire rifles, a few of them. The GSGs have always been one that the government seems to have a real issue with, and I don't know why. I really don't know why it doesn't. Yeah, we won't even get into it. But there's the one that I'd be curious about is the Blaze 47, because that one kind of sets the precedent, and I feel like there hasn't been a tonal shift since then. So yeah, I guess based on that, and you're seeing this decision happen in real time, so take it for what it's worth. I would kind of expect the GSGs to be on there. I would not expect a rimfire status to exempt a firearm from CFAC's recommendations. But do I expect those recommendations to be carried through? That's a different question. I'm less certain. I'm not uncertain. I do think that if they're asking for recommendations on August 28th, an OIC is a very fast thing to happen. And given the recommendations will likely have come from the government in the first place, they can draft that OIC up already. So I'm not totally certain, and I'm curious. My concern is long term whether or not this is used as CFAC has recommended that this is how I kind of expect it to shake out. And I haven't said this elsewhere because it's just not, this is pure prognostication. And I really actually don't like doing prognostication because it is really hard to predict what this government is going to do. Facts. But what I kind of wonder is the way it is shaking up is that if they introduce these C-21 amendments to make some things happen now, introduce this definition to stop anything new from being introduced to the market, and they rush that through. And then on August 28th, Marco Mendicino gets the recommendations from CFAC for all of the existing guns that can be banned. Because to be quite blunt, that recommendation or that legislation with the definition is a total, I hate the term, but nothing burger politically. Because to tell the electorate that you will not allow any future guns to come in is a preventative measure. It doesn't really carry a lot of water, especially with anti-gun people who want to see existing guns pulled off the market. They don't have a problem with the AR-25. They have a problem with the AR-15. Well, 25, is that a thing? Whatever future gun. They got no problem with the XM18. They do have a problem with the AR-15. So I think if you think about that, then politically, that definition doesn't bring the Liberals a lot in an election. And if we think this is kind of all pivoting towards election benefit, which it seems to, then you would think, okay, well, what else would? Okay, well, what would sound really great would be getting an independent board of nonpartisan experts to produce a list of guns that should be prohibited. Absolutely too dangerous for Canadian hands. And then you call an election. And then you say, if you don't elect me, Pierre Poilievre will let these guns be legal. And I kind of feel like that's where they're going to follow through, because that last step of to take the CFAC recommendations and then to actually say, okay, no, we are going to ban these guns. Incredibly difficult for this government to do. Again, for those that have been around for the entire time of the call, like this government struggled to make marijuana legal. Seizing guns is going to be very difficult. Prohibiting them is also going to be difficult and has a tremendous amount of political risk, because as we saw with G46, a lot of hunters and gun owners, just to be blunt, only get off the bench when their shit's actually being threatened. Like straight up, like a real, like, if this bill passes, I lose my Ruger #1, then they care. But until then, they don't. And I think the Liberals kind of recognize this, or maybe they've pulled on it. And I think what they recognize is that by getting the recommendations from CFAC, they don't risk those going on the chopping block. The hunter can go, well, those are just recommendations. If they win the election, they won't actually ban them. And for those of us that have been in this fight long enough, we heard that argument in 2015. I dealt with very well-known, prominent members of the gun community whose names would shock you today, saying, we'll work with anyone. If you want to vote Liberal, go for it. The Liberals won't ban guns. Because we'd had Harper for 10 years, and they were thinking Harper didn't make anything legal. So if Harper didn't give me my legal ability to hunt with an AR-15, then Trudeau won't take it away. That was the logic. I think Liberals are trying to regain that. I don't think it will work because of they've poked the bear effectively too many times. This will be quite the week. We've been in the dark for over 6 months. It will be a terrible week. Unfortunately, I'm going to be trying to check in, but the reality is, guys, like, I do have to keep 2 companies going for my family. So I got to be in my other shop. We have a company that does dry ice cleaning for cars, collector cars and classic cars. And I've got a really nice 67 Cobra in there right now. And the guy's expecting it back for the weekend, and he's paying me very well to do it. So I'm going to be in there. I'm going to be trying to listen to what happens, because I'm that kind of guy who's literally going to be operating a giant blasting machine while listening to Parle View on headphones. Have I mentioned that I would really like a new government because I didn't have to used to do this? But but I'm going to be trying to follow along. But it's going to be a lot of videos like this of recapping at the end of the night. So I appreciate everyone that's hung around. I am going to be doing more of these videos. Going to be wrapping this one up too. I don't want to be on here for 2 hours. But I am going to be doing a lot more of them. In case you guys can't tell, it's the way things are going, and I'm fully embracing it. I really like it. I also really like, just as an aside, I really do enjoy this interaction. I'm going to close out with it. I'll bring back around anyway. So we defund poly once we get a real government. Yeah, I don't know how they still are around, to be quite honest. It's a very core group of impassioned people, I guess. I feel so bad. I mean, I don't know. I guess I just feel bad for them because I do know some of them, like they did live through that shooting, and like, Jesus, it must have been awful. And for someone to be involved for this long, I know it sounds really weird because I don't like what they want to do, and I completely disagree with them, but you got to respect the, like, Natalie Provost and stuff, like 20 years of advocacy are going on that now. I can't imagine. I'm 10 years in. I've been at it for 14 years with gun politics. So I was involved in that first attempt to get rid of the gun registry, and now 10 years professionally, and like my spirit is broken. I can't imagine going through the trauma they went through and then also being engaged for 20 years in this debate. I think people have to give those women involved in that a tremendous amount of respect. You can disagree with them, absolutely, but you have to respect the effort that they've put in. If you don't respect the effort they're putting in, they're going to beat you as well, to be quite clear. Just like any sports analogy, if you step into a lacrosse, the only sport I ever played really was lacrosse. If you stepped into a lacrosse box and you didn't respect the people you're playing with, they're going to rock your world. So respect their game, man. They're very impressive. I just wish they would stop. You mentioned you're thinking of selling a 4570. How could I contact you about it? Honestly, Dan at calibermag.ca, just shoot me an email. It's just Dan, my name, calibermag.ca. That's my email. Shoot me an email. We can make a deal. It's what is it? It's the Trapper. It's a Marlin Trapper. It's the one we reviewed. Just Google Marlin 4570 caliber on our website, and that's the gun. Literally, it's that one. When I do the garage sale for a fun thing for a bunch of the guns that we're selling that haven't featured, I'm going to try and find a back issue, and you'll get the gun and the magazine, and I'll sign the magazine. Not that anyone cares, but that way you can get it because a lot of them are on the cover and stuff like that. How does federal government affect Alberta and Saskatchewan provincial? They made it pass their own gun legislation. So Alberta and Saskatchewan are trying to basically throw up hurdles. Alberta, I think Saskatchewan's done a similar route. Alberta's route is to say that anyone who is going to collect guns, like literally who's charged with confiscation of firearms, so I shouldn't use charged, but tasked with the confiscation of firearms, will need to be provincially licensed. And the reason they can do that is because, again, weird nuances. A lot of people don't know about guns in Canada. CFOs fall into two categories, federal or provincial. They're not both. Alberta's CFO, Terry Bryant, is a provincial CFO, meaning she is literally paid by the province of Alberta. She works for Danielle Smith. That is her boss. Other CFOs, like I believe Ontario's, are federal. They're federally paid. They work for the Canadian Firearms Program. They answer to the Minister of Public Safety and the RCMP effectively. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it is a huge difference, if that makes sense, because Terry Bryant is who licenses all of the Alberta gun owners. She is the one in charge of guns in Alberta. So if someone wants to take a government agent, she would be the one who licenses that person. Again, this is why the Alberta election is so important, because the NDP wins and Danielle Smith loses. They'll get a new CFO, probably a federal CFO, which I think the NDP, don't quote me on this because I'm totally drawing a blank on the reference, but I could have sworn at some point a while ago, I remember reading something about the NDP in Alberta saying that they would fire Terry Bryant and get a federal CFO to bring them in compliance with federal gun policy. And if they do that, then Alberta loses that ability. They literally lose the ability because now your licensing is handled federally. You can't really insert your provincial authority there with the same ability. So that's the mechanism by which they're doing it. The effectiveness, I think it's tremendously effective. I don't think it's tremendously effective on a boots on the ground way, because I don't think the Trudeau Liberals have any intention of sending confiscation agents to anyone's door. So they obviously have no intention of licensing anyone to do so. What I think it does is it sticks a provincial finger in the eye of a federal policy. It says, no, prove me wrong. It's literally that meme. Because if it doesn't happen, and let's say that they ban all these guns and Alberta doesn't, well, Alberta is a great statistical anomaly now. If the gun crimes in Alberta don't go up a bunch, then the rest of the country go, well, what do we do all this for? So it's effective on two levels. It's effective in a very real way that, like, it would make it much harder for the government to confiscate your firearms if you're an Albertan. But that's also quite unlikely to happen. And then there's a political level where it's working. And that's where I think the real value lies, is in that kind of thing, is in provinces telling the federal government, no, we're not really interested. I don't know how you can focus while listening. I can't do schoolwork when watching. I can't. So my work, my other work is it's blasting effectively. We use a dry ice blasting machine. Or I'm doing like pretty minor work on cars that I don't need to have full brain power for. So I can listen out. I usually listen to audiobooks and podcasts when I'm doing that kind of stuff. The SECI meetings filming with dread. I only read the recaps now. Me too, which is my segue now that we're getting up on in 2 hours. Yeah, the mental health toll on all this. So for everyone that's watching this, you're obviously all people that are invested in the gun debate. I mentioned in the last video, mental health is really important. And it's something that a lot of us, I'm assuming, dudes, because I know the statistics on our readership, and 98% of you are men. And as a guy, it's the only experience I can speak to. This stuff's pretty tough, and it's coming at a time when a lot of us are probably struggling with other stressors, like me, like finances. Like, stuff's really expensive. You go to Subway and it's $25. I went and bought like a few groceries. Like, I had my experience of you look at like 5 things rolling down the Safeway conveyor belt and $120 bill, and you go, what the fuck? And it's true. There's no mistakes, everything's gotten terribly expensive. On my side, I got the added downside of I happen to have hitched my financial wagon to the gun industry, which is an interesting one, but I'm certainly not giving up. So it's pretty tough. We just came through a pretty tough winter. We got a government that just went through a really terrible COVID management time. They're not handling the economy well. They're not listening to us. The party that we don't expect to listen to us isn't, in terms of the Liberals. The party that we had some hope they might, being the NDP, is now not. So there's a lot of reasons for guys. Guns are getting expensive. Ammo is getting expensive. There's a lot of reasons for guys to be pretty bummed out. And by all means, this is where I'll say, I want you guys to subscribe. I want you guys to watch our videos because we do this for work. This is me working. You guys watching is telling me that what I'm working or what I'm doing is working. But if you're stressed about this stuff and it's causing a lot of anxiety, then don't. Straight up, just don't watch. They will email you or contact you. That's their responsibility. If you're worried about this in a huge way, you don't need to watch every SECU meeting. You don't need to watch every House debate. You don't need to watch every single MP's Twitter feed vociferously to make sure they're saying the right things. You should go live your life, because in these days of hyper-partisan politics and all these other issues, I really do believe that we have to, much like I said, I have no patience for gun owners that don't practice what they preach. If you believe that people should be free and unite, then believe that people should be free and unite. If you believe that people should lead their best lives, then go live your best life. Do it yourself. Don't bury yourself in all these things. And I say this as someone who, as I've said, I have clinical anxiety. I was diagnosed with it probably 14 years ago or so. I have PTSD as well. I've got, anxiety and depression are relatively linked, so it's hard to tell them apart sometimes. But I've got my own issues, and a lot of them are linked to working in this industry. My anxiety has effectively come back. I had it many years ago, no joke, from working in the automotive industry when that one collapsed. And that's where that kind of started. So coming back to this now, my anxiety is getting freaking spiked. And I watch SECU. It's part of my job. I have medications, I have a treatment system, I have a psychologist I talk to help me manage this so that I can do this job. But it's not your job. You're just a gun owner. And I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way, but like, you don't have a responsibility to stay abreast of this stuff. The government has a responsibility to you. You don't have a responsibility to listen to the government tell you what they're doing. They have a responsibility to tell you if something changes in your life. If the guns you own become prohibited, they have to tell you this. You don't need to listen to everything. And I think at today's age, there's a lot of guys out there, and I'm going to be talking more and more about this mental health stuff because it's really important. There's a lot of guys out there that are struggling, and you got to take some stuff off the table, guys. Like, you got to look at the stressors in your life, your work, your family, your hobbies, and the cost benefit, and by all means, don't get out of the gun, keep shooting and all that, but take the stress out. You don't need to. Just buy the guns you want to buy and go shoot them at the range. And if you get a letter from the government, vote for someone else, because all this stuff moves glacially slow. And I think a lot of people look back in time, I think it's, there's a lot of navel gazing, a lot of concern, a lot of inward concern, a lot of stress, a lot of what are they going to do, a lot of what are they going to do, and what is that person going to do? Get a little bit of focus back on yourself is not a bad thing. Go fishing. What do you want to do? And go do that. And just trust that, if you ever want to know what's going on, we'll be here to check in. The videos will be posted, the recaps. I'm going to try and keep posting recaps because I am wrapping up now, for those that don't know. If you've got any questions, fire away, because I'll be out of here in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to be posting more recaps. I'm going to be posting more short articles so you can kind of get just to the information, of like what happened today. We'll post an article on the website tomorrow once we kind of know how the amendments are shaking out, because I expect that we'll see some news about the time allotments for the next few meetings, because they have to assign these next few meetings. There's basically 2 meetings left or whatever that they can do. They'll schedule those. We'll do an article tomorrow to tell everyone that. But just check in on it. Don't feel like you need to keep your finger on the pulse, because ultimately send your emails to your MPs, send your emails, phone them, make your meetings, do what you can do, and then check out. Go do something else. Like, do as much as you can and then go relax, because it's taking a huge toll. And men today are not healthy up here. And I think it's because of a lot of this stuff. We're taking on a lot. And it's important to recognize that we don't always need to. So, look after yourselves and look after your friends. Make sure everyone else around you is, if you got buddies that are acting a bit weird, it might feel really, really strange, but I've done it before with friends. And sometimes you'll ask a friend like, hey, I'm a little bit worried. Are you okay? And once in a while you'll hear something back of like, hey, no, I'm not actually. And it's really important to be there in those moments. So ask people if they're okay. Make sure you guys are too. Look after yourselves, look after your families, look after your own finances. Don't get pressured into buying guns just because you think you need to own one. If you're worried they're going to be banned and you want to buy one before they're banned, yeah, okay, sure. If you want to buy one just as a show of solidarity, that's crazy. Go buy a Savage 99 instead. But semis are super fun too. But yeah, enjoy yourselves. I'll probably do a video. I don't know if I'll do one tomorrow, because like I said, I'll be in the other shop. I'll probably be doing some writing and stuff for the website and working on the magazine in the evening, hopefully. But it is Tuesday, so hopefully Thursday. We will definitely have a video out on Tuesday or Thursday or Friday. And we'll do another live stream probably Friday or the weekend or something, to just try and keep the video content rolling. And we'll just keep talking about stuff. So look after you guys. I think it's been a late one. Hope everyone's keeping well. Bit of a bummer day for sure. But we'll wait and see. It doesn't really change things too much. It does change the timeline, but I don't think it changes necessarily the outcomes. The end verdict was always going to be an election. That's what we were looking for, and that is where I think our community will find the solution. That hasn't changed. So if you're really worried, just think ultimately that hasn't changed. The solution to our problem has not changed one bit. Just the problem and the timeline of the problem seems to have accelerated itself slightly, but that doesn't necessarily mean all that much. So stay calm, chill, relax. But absolutely, if you have not already, email your MP, phone them now. Like if you're nervous, call them now. It's going to be on voicemail. Their office is closed. You can say whatever you want. Now, don't say anything terrible, and definitely do not threaten them. Jesus, stop doing that. Just call and leave a voicemail. Do it now. And we'll keep abreast of this, and we'll get through it together, guys. So good live stream. I'll try and get that garage stream working too, so I can put my forks back together. Really fun to get that together. Yeah, no, thank you. No need to thank me. Thank you for hanging out, guys. It's been a real pleasure. Actually, it's nice to chit chat about this stuff, and fun to get back into the gun stuff after the old little brief paternity break there, and little mental health break and stuff. But we'll keep chatting. Like I said, I'll chat with you guys next couple days. Have a good one.